Gut-wrenching comes to mind. Fill in your adjectives and adverbs, and they are probably apropos. We know what happened on Saturday in Atlanta. We will go through the postmortem as we have a number of times. But for the first time with these two gentlemen here on Buckeyes Live, right here at the Voice of College Football, we come your way typically on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. That's why it's important to subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. We got Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, and of course, Kevin Noon joining us from Buckeye Huddle. Join him on his podcast as well, the Big Me Podcast. Guys, how we doing? We made it back home, at least.
Yeah, we did make it
Yes.
back home after some travel issues, but we were not alone. The entire country seemed to have problems with it, but the trip home was easier in terms of mechanics, but maybe a little bit more difficult in terms of reflection.
All right, Steve, here we go. I posted a video yesterday right here, the 10 most crushing, excruciating postseason losses for Ohio State going back to 1980. Folks, check it out if you want to be in misery for 15 minutes or so. Steve, this ranks high on the list. This one is tough to take.
Well, yeah, I think it's up there for a lot of reasons, but probably the biggest is that this was definitely a winnable game. I mean, they're up 14 points going to the fourth quarter, and kind of symmetrous to Ohio State played North Carolina in basketball here a couple of weeks ago and took a 2-point lead with 2 seconds left. That's a game you need to win 100 out of 100 times when the other team's got to go the length of the court to score to force overtime, which North Carolina did, and then North Carolina won in overtime. So very symmetrical to that. Also symmetrical to the Clemson loss in the 2019 season, the Fiesta Bowl out in Arizona, where Ohio State threw the interception, Fields threw the interception in the end zone very late in the game, and Trevor Lawrence and Clemson pulled out the win. I think 29-23 was the final score there. And very similar, had Ohio State scored and kicked the extra point and won that game 30-29. It's kind of the way that this went with Georgia. The Buckeyes had that late lead and gave it up with a touchdown in the final minute. And then obviously down a point, C.J. Stroud drove Ohio State into position, but not quite close enough. And people will pin this on Noah Ruggles. That's very misguided. I think the issue, for Ohio State, as we'll go through, is just the defense just quite simply wasn't a national championship caliber defense. And again, a lot of the same problems that they had in the loss to Michigan. Back-to-back games, giving up 40 points again to end the season, just as it was last year against Michigan and Utah. And just the second time in 133 years of Ohio State football where the Buckeyes scored 35 points or more and lost a game. The other one was the Orange Bowl to Clemson, 40-35 back in 2013. So only twice in the entire history of Ohio State football have the Buckeyes scored 35 or more points and lost a game, and this was one of them. So any way you want to cut it, is it their most painful or most difficult loss ever? You may, in the postseason, when you frame it like that, yes, there were a lot of Michigan losses down through the years back in the 90s that were devastating, cost them a shot at the national championship. This certainly cost them a shot at the national championship, no doubt. 98 Michigan State is up there. I'd say that Clemson loss re-referenced would be up there. Michigan State 2015. So any number of tough losses, and you're kind of left. Did they miss a window here? You had two of the best quarterbacks you're ever going to have wearing an Ohio State uniform with Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud, and you didn't win a national championship with them. And very unfortunate circumstances. Only one win over Michigan in their 4 years as well, although the 2020 game wasn't played. But so, yeah, it was a lot of missed opportunity, no doubt.
Yeah, you look at this game, and I think one of the big issues too, when I look at it, is there are a lot of people going into this game who are like, God, I hope Ohio State doesn't get embarrassed. I hope Ohio State doesn't get run out of the building. Ohio State opens up this lead. leads for much of the game, and now we're sitting here looking at it as the one that got away when, truthfully speaking, 3 hours prior to everything going awry, I think fans were just hoping that Ohio State would show up and not lay an egg. And in the fourth quarter, things happened, and we can get into whether or not it was targeting on Marvin Harrison Jr. or not. There were a lot of breaks. That was truly a fourth down when that was called short on the field, and then they go up to the booth, and it appears that he got it. But it's one thing that can't be denied is that UGA came out and played its what off in the fourth quarter and really took it to the Buckeyes there. A lot of Ohio State's issues came back to light in that fourth quarter, things that we hadn't necessarily seen through the first three quarters. And no, the defense didn't play its best game by any stretch of the imagination, but there were large stretches of the game where the defense was playing well, but then it felt as if Ohio State kind of went back to some of its old tendencies. The defense got way too aggressive. Guys got stuck out in difficult positions, and I'm going to call a truth. Guys fell down, and there were mistakes along the way. So it certainly is one that is difficult to swallow, and I think it's compounded by the fact that Michigan lost, and everybody looks at TCU as, oh, well, Ohio State would have gone on to the next game, and this would have been Oregon to Alabama. And while the team was talented, that this would have resulted in a national championship and a ring and everything else. And, that's something that'll be fun to speculate. And, I may even go through and do a mock simulation type thing of what Ohio State TCU would look like. That will either get 10 million viewers or 2. I'm not exactly sure where Ohio State's fan base would be on that act of fan fiction. But, certainly a difficult game. But I think I walked away from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and I don't wear any sort of hat other than just I'm neutral and I'm there to cover the game. But I took off that hat for a minute. I was like, I think that this team came out and really accomplished a lot. It didn't finish the job, but it certainly was a better effort for 48 minutes than I think about anybody could have predicted. And I was somebody who actually picked Ohio State to win.
Ryan Dawes, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your support, sir. Morning. You gentlemen have given great perspectives on the loss to Georgia. I am looking forward to next season. I mean, at least we are not USC. Yeah, we could do a separate episode on USC's collapse in the final 4 minutes against Tulane. Not against Georgia, against Tulane, and all due respect there. Come on. All right. So, Kevin, we'll stay with you because in a game like this, as Steve pointed out, similar to the Clemson game of 2019, the loss by 6 points, when the game's this excruciating, there are those landmark plays, calls, incidents. So Marvin Harrison targeting, also having to leave the game. So the targeting call affects the scoring opportunity. The Harrison loss is enormous, of course. The Kirby Smart timeout call that negated the fake punt successfully at midfield with an 11-point lead with about 10 minutes left. Correct me on the timing if something in that range. Of course, the Brock Bowers fourth down conversion, it seemed to be the correct reversal. However, and there's always those. So there's a difference between crud, that was a bad break, but they got it right. Justice was served versus, hey, we got ripped off. Where do you weigh those key moments?
Well, obviously the Marvin Harrison was the most gigantic of everything. I mean, not only losing Marvin Harrison Jr. for the remainder of the game, but then Ohio State had to settle for a field goal to make a 2-score lead into a 2-score lead versus maybe potentially getting a new set of downs and being able to make a 2-score lead into a 3-score lead. And that's not to say that Georgia didn't come out like a house on fire, but now they're going to have to do it an extra time. And while Ohio State's offense still would have been without Marvin Harrison Jr., there's a lot to be said about having to come back from 3 scores versus 2 scores in that amount of time. It's not like this happened in the second quarter. This happened, this happened with a minute left in the third. So we're talking about 16 minutes of game time left. I like Ohio State's chances there. I mean, obviously we could play the what if game and say, what if Marvin Harrison Jr. did not get hit like that? Well, there's not a doubt in my mind that Ohio State wins that game if Marvin Harrison Jr. remains in the game the way that the offense was chugging. Ohio State may have needed to score on every possession, but Ohio State absolutely could have scored on every possession moving forward in that game. So, and this isn't to take away anything from Emeka Egbuka, who ends up being the leading receiver in the game. This doesn't take away stuff from Xavier Johnson, from Julian Fleming, but you can't take the best player off the field when you already have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who has been shut down for the season, when you already are without Trevion Henderson, and largely by that point of the game, Mayan Williams. It's just player after player after player. And that's not to say that Georgia didn't have its issues. Darnell Washington's lost for the game. They lose 2 outside linebackers during the course of the game. There's a lot of things going on there. But you mentioned the fake punt, and it's come out since that Ohio State apparently had 12 guys on the field. So maybe Ohio State could have been the beneficiary of a break in that game, and that doesn't get called. And I don't think you can go to the booth after the fact to count that up. I don't know. Replay is such a collection of willy-nilly loose rules that are poorly interpreted to begin with that I don't trust anything that comes in out of what's replayable and what's not replayable. I just don't. I mean, I'm very careful in all of this because I don't want it to be a case of saying that Ohio State got screwed in this game. No, Brett screwed Brett. I mean, in terms of the Montreal screw job, Ohio State screwed Ohio State by not being able to get a couple more yards to set up something a little bit inside of a 50-yard field goal. Ohio State screwed up when a defender falls down on a one-play drive, and when time is Ohio State's ally, and you have 6 minutes to try and slow down Georgia. Just slow Georgia down, for Pete's sake, and it's a one-play drive. Ohio State screwed Ohio State, but it certainly feels like Ohio State was born under a bad sign for 2022, because I think if we look at the giant cosmic flip-a-coin game, Ohio State ended up on the short end more times than it ended up on the right side.
Yeah, those were all good points and a great wrestling reference there, obviously, to the Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels Survivor Series from 1997. So this was an epic game and 2 great teams, no question about it. And they basically played to a complete standoff. And as it turned out, Georgia, the final analysis, had 1 more point than Ohio State did. Ohio State's just as good as Georgia. Georgia's just as good as Ohio State. So, all the arguing and fussing and whatever, yeah, Georgia won the game, and ultimately that's, all that matters. But Ohio State came away from this after being embarrassed by Michigan in a much better light, I feel. And, is that a loser's perspective to look at things that way? I guess so. I've been around this program and this sport for so many years. And in my time, Ohio State's won the national championship twice, 2002, which the 20th anniversary of that was just yesterday, where they beat Miami on January the 3rd, 2002. Much happier times, obviously, to pull off that Herculean upset. And they were an 11-point underdog in that game and won that game out in Phoenix. They were a 6.5-point underdog in this game, led for a good portion of the game and didn't win it. So, things end up the way that they end up. You started this off by, how could the fourth quarter have gone differently? I have asked when the game was over, I filed my story. That took me about 5 minutes. And I walked from the photo bunker to the interview room, and I saw Matt Garvey, who is the public relations director for the Peach Bowl. And I said, Matt, can we get a pool reporter to ask the officials why they rescinded the targeting penalty? And you have to understand the mechanics of this. The targeting penalty is called on the field. It can be called on the field, but it always has to be verified and I don't know what the word would be, agreed to, confirmed. It has to be confirmed via replay. They have to go frame by frame and look at it and confirm that it was targeting. In this instance, they did that while Marvin Harrison was down on the ground. The officials reviewed it. I was on the field, and the stadium speakers were not very good, to where if the referee ever did come on and say, yeah, we've picked it up, it's no good. I never heard that announcement. All I ever saw was Ohio State came out and kicked the field goal on 4th down. Perhaps on television they clarified it. I don't know. I guess after the fact, Bill Lamonier was like, oh, yeah, they got it right. So, I don't know what Bill was.
Reps.
Yeah, I don't know what Bill was saying in the interim. What was he saying in the 2 minutes while they were reviewing it? Did they go to commercial? What happened? I don't know. So I asked Matt, could we get a pool report? He goes, oh, they probably already left, the officials. They probably get them out of there pretty quickly. And so I let it go. And the next day I emailed the public relations people for the playoff. And I said, hey, can we get somebody to clarify what happened on the targeting? Be it the national supervisor of officials, whoever the replay official was, and they basically put me in connection with the coordinator of officials for the Pac-12. And I sent this email and explained, this is what I want to find out, what was missing for that to be targeting. And he sent me a reply. We don't comment on specific plays or whatever. And I said, well, with all due respect, it should have been handled on site that night. And, with a pool reporter, and it wasn't handled, the protocol wasn't followed properly. I said, just boil this down. Tell me why it wasn't targeting. I haven't heard anything back yet. So if and when I ever do, which I'm not holding my breath that I'll ever hear anything back. But again, as you say, for some reason they rescinded that. And that was critical. I mean, yeah, it knocked Marvin Harrison out of the game. But had they called the targeting and stuck with it, it's first to goal at the 2-yard line. And they're going to punch that into the end zone, you would think, and go ahead by 18 points at the start of the fourth quarter. And 18 points is much more difficult to overcome than 14 was. So, Ohio State had opportunities, didn't take full advantage of them. Obviously, at the end, as we said, there was plenty of time left when CJ Stroud got them the first down at the 30-yard line. I would have liked, they ran down Hayden on the very next play for a loss of a yard, probably just thinking, we'll get 3 or 4 yards here, get a little closer, get the clock running, that way Georgia doesn't get one last shot with the ball. And I would have really liked, they then threw 2 passes that were not completed after that, including one where he had to scramble and throw it away to avoid like a 20-yard sack, which would have basically killed it right then. The play that had killed Georgia all day long was the play fake and roll out to the wide side, and Emeka Egbuka come from the short side across to the wide side, the crossing route, and hit him for a 5, 6, 7-yard gain. And now you've got a manageable 40-yard field goal. And, it's not quite as difficult on Noah Ruggles as it turned out to be. Again, can't put any of this on him. Their defense simply was not up to snuff. A slip by Lathan Ransom on the 76-yard touchdown, and the guy's gone. Again, no help over the top. When you've got them kind of backed up in their own end, why you're not, trying to keep everything underneath, I don't know. But that's the same call basically that killed him against Michigan. So I don't know. It's all over. Autopsies, are what they are. The patient is still dead. So, we could probably debate it all day, but they made enough mistakes to lose the game, and that's exactly what they did.
Well, in the college football playoff and the New Year's Six games, they just really convinced me that nobody knows what targeting is, because old friend Bryson Shaw nearly decapitated somebody in the USC Tulane game, and that was called targeting on the field, only to be called not targeting in the booth, and that's a different set of officials, calling that game and everything else, different conference. So I think back to the drawing board on targeting with what it is and what it isn't. And I saw Ferris commenting in the chat about targeting no, intent to injure yes. Well, I said on social media, okay, if that's not targeting, that's still something what we saw there. That was a vicious hit. That was a vicious hit, and we're supposed to be taking those types of plays out of the game, player welfare this, player welfare that. And I know you can't suddenly rewrite the rules at that point and say, well, all right, it's not targeting, but it's still something. So we're going to do something there. You can't change the engines at 35,000 feet. But intent to injure, I think that's something that's probably been around for a long time in terms of college football. When you go back to the history of college football, and players were dying, and academic types were trying to get rid of the game because it was so violent, and they came up with a better set of rules to try and have maybe a little bit of player safety even before the days of hard helmets and face masks and things of that nature. I just have a real problem with how that whole thing was put together. I was in the post game room when Steve was trying to get the pool reporter thing done, so I kind of overheard that myself, and I was kind of nodding in agreement. But I was in the back row with the photographers. Again, not a conspiracy theory, not a second shooter from somewhere other than the grassy knoll, but I think that's going to be something that's going to be remembered, and this is going to be the Sean Wade ejection comment that will come out of this 2022 game.
When it comes to expectations, as Steve outlined, I think both can exist. That Ohio State's an elite program, expect Big Ten championships, college football playoff appearances, and some breakthrough to win national championships on whatever periodic basis. But you can still say, let's evaluate this team. Let's evaluate this program. They walked into this stadium against probably the best team in the country, and they competed tooth and nail to the final play. So is the program broken? Is the team broken? I don't believe so. That doesn't mean you don't strive to get better and diagnose the weaknesses. But there's a difference between had they stepped on this field and didn't show themselves to be worthy of a playoff spot or this game versus saying, our expectations and the standard is still to win championships. But, this team played their hearts out, and we've got a talented roster and a well-functioning program.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, look at Clemson. We still consider them to be an elite program, and are they still in the top two? No. Alabama, certainly elite program. 1 year, obviously not in the playoffs. Still certainly an elite program. So there's still 4 or 5 programs. Michigan is kind of weaseling their way up in there, and again, we're having the whole off-season debate whether or not Jim Harbaugh, wants to leave Michigan or not. I think that this is a lot of salary kvetching, that he wants that clawback that they took from him, that money that he didn't earn previously that they took back from him. He's now suddenly earning it. So he wants it back. But maybe he'll surprise me and go to the Colts or the Broncos or something, or the or who is it? The
Panthers, Carolina.
Yeah, the Panthers are now on the clock. So how funny would it be for him to go somewhere and have CJ Stroud be his quarterback, and CJ Stroud would have to hold his nose for the first month or two until he figures out that he can work with this guy as his coach. But that's a long way off from happening, obviously. But at any rate, they're definitely still elite. They're definitely still recruiting at a high level. And I oversimplify it when I say, well, you didn't win a national championship with Fields and Stroud. Is it possible to win one with McCord or Brown or whoever, the younger Montgomery kid or whoever, comes up down the line to play quarterback for the Buckeyes? That's a tremendous question. I mean, Tennessee did not win one with Peyton Manning, but did the next year with a guy named T. Martin, who time has largely forgotten, other than his name is on a street sign outside of Neyland Stadium. But anything's possible. But you got to build again. I've harped on this and we've harped on it forever. The recruiting on defense in 19 and 20 was not what it needed to be. And that came home to roost once again in this game, as it did in the Michigan game prior and the Michigan game last year. So, got to get some studs. It's great that you have Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, who were those studs on the roster, need production out of them. Sonny Styles is a stud. CJ Hicks is a stud. Neither of them got to play much on defense this year. Maybe they step in and become starters next year. Who knows? But got to get your best 11 on the field. Got to get a better 11 on the field is my feeling.
Well, and part of the thing, too, is I think that people see what happened and then look at Ohio State, their schedule next season. And it's going to be a more difficult schedule with who they face on the road. And with nine conference games, you either get 5 at home and 4 on the road, or the other way around. And this year it's going to be 5 on the road in league play at Notre Dame, and this who they draw and who they play on the road, especially Michigan to end the season. And it does feel like a missed opportunity. But let's not forget that coming out of Justin Fields, it was at least believed to be a pretty wide open quarterback competition. Who's this CJ Stroud kid? Oh, he's not going to be able to lead the team. Even once he starts playing, people were like, oh, they picked the wrong guy or whatever. And now, we have the benefit of 2 years of data points to look at. It's like, oh, well, he was pretty good, actually. So, this program has not been short in recent years of putting out quality quarterbacks and having them ready and everything else. But, I think that everybody is always worried about what's behind door number 3 and it being a reincarnation of Joe Boserman. So there's always going to be some concerns there. But, we'll on to the next one. We'll see kind of what's there. But, I've seen some argument going on in the chat once again, as I'm kind of half paying attention here and paying attention to the chat, of people saying that anybody who's saying that Ohio State was the better team and making comments there. Well, Kirby Smart said that on that night that Ohio State was the better team. And, I really don't think that when you have the coaches saying that, sure, it's up for debate. It's all subjective, but I think Ohio State was the better team for large stretches of the game and just couldn't close it.
I had my doubts about how they would play and where their heads would be and their confidence level would be. And my thoughts in that direction were erased within, 5 minutes of game time. And throughout most of that game, I thought, I don't necessarily believe Ohio State's a better team 365 days of the year, but they look like the better team to me most of this night. So, where this hurts in a certain respect is you guys see it all the time. I see it all the time in monitoring these chats and taking phone calls and so forth through the week. As college football fans, what do for the time, especially between January and September, is argue numbers, meaning how many championships do you have? When was the last time we won a championship here. You haven't won one since 2014, or what's the playoff record for Ohio State versus Clemson or Alabama? What's the Big Ten's playoff record? And when you accumulate the wins or the losses, the closeness of the games dissipates, and the evaluation of how good the program or the team is completely is melted away by just the sheer numbers of how many championships do you have, what's your playoff record, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, all the bragging rights stuff, that's what keeps the Hot Stove League alive here for January through August. I have to admit, is a bit depressing. Thinking about going to watch spring practice in March at 8:30 in the morning, and all these other things that happen during the off season. I'm trying not to let the depression overtake me that that this didn't result in a trip to the national championship game, because this team, 1 through 85, deserved that chance to try and match up with TCU, or, had it been Michigan, whoever it would have been, to try and be the national champion this year. I think in talking to people down there, it was kind of evident that there wasn't an LSU from 2019 that was head and shoulders, above everybody else. There wasn't a Georgia from 2021 who was, other than their loss to Alabama. I think the right team won the second game. I think they were the better team all season long and just had a misstep in the SEC championship and then got a chance to make it right in the national championship. They were the better team. And it was there for the taking for any of the four teams that could win two games. It was there. And they were so closely matched that both games were decided in the final minute. So, that's what makes it a sad situation, I think, for Ohio State and its fans. But, not everybody's going to win the last game of the season. Only one of the four teams can be the champion. So, you knew you were an underdog going in. You acquitted yourself pretty well. So, that's not a loser way to look at it. That's just reality, I suppose.
Aside from my own rooting interests personally, from a professional and business side, I was relishing the debate between Ohio State and Michigan fans all off season, where Michigan fans would say, hey, we beat you 2 years in a row. We won 2 consecutive Big Ten championships. And Ohio State fans would say, well, we won the national championship. Had they won over TCU without a shot at Michigan, and that would have been the great debate all off season, is who had the bragging rights, because one is a national championship and the other had the series over the last 2 years.
That's like a buddy of mine. He and I always, go back and forth about different things. We were both on the basketball team our junior and senior year, and I played more and scored more points in my career, junior and senior year, than he did, but he had the better senior year. So he would say, I was better than you as a senior, and I said, career. It's the career totals that matter. the same thing. He values the but in our senior season, the one that really mattered, I was better, so just little funny things like that. But who's better? You both are. So there you go.
We always skew the numbers to fit the argument.
We sure do.
Absolutely. Got to. Matt Garman, appreciate you being here. With Ryan Day seemingly giving up play calling duties, who do you think takes over? All signs point to someone on staff already, but would you advise giving someone the keys with no prior experience?
I don't know if it's a case of guys not having prior experience. These guys have been on the offensive channel all along. It's not like they were plucked out of the stands or whatever and suddenly given a headset and said, now go. There's a lot of belief that this could be kind of a Justin Fry / Brian Hartline operation. Justin Fry has had experience through his career being on the offensive channel at UCLA and certainly now at Ohio State. Brian Hartline is still relatively young in the coaching profession, even though we look at his career and it's like, wow, he's been here several years now. But it's not like Ryan Day is suddenly going to be off headsets. It's not like he's going to wander around and be, who was it? A lot of coaches have been famous for just kind of wandering around and counting blades of grass. And that's not what Ryan Day is going to be doing at this point. I know a lot of people love the idea of going out of house and bringing in some hot shot. I don't know if Lincoln Riley is necessarily the right words to use right now based on how things have been going for him in terms of postseason, but bring in some hot shot, which isn't necessarily going to work. You need to sit there and have somebody who buys into the Ryan Day system. This is going to be the Ryan Day system. It's just going to be somebody else who's going to be largely in charge of calling the plays. I understand the concern that the poster had about bringing in somebody who hasn't necessarily done it under pressure circumstances, and at Ohio State, you're constantly under pressure circumstances. Even when you're up 70-0, it's pressure because you're going to get second guessed about why you weren't allowing the third teamers to do what they need to do out there instead of running student body left, student body right. So, I think it's going to be some sort of situation where it's going to be Fry and Hartline doing this. And the good news is you're going to have a couple of weeks before you go to Notre Dame in the season to kind of get some of the kinks out. So the schedule for everything that we're going to talk about, how bad the schedule is for Ohio State next season, it's good in terms of week 1 and week 2. they're not necessarily playing their toughest games, and you have some chances to work out some of the schematic issues.
Yeah, I can't get a firm read right now on where this is headed, or if he was really serious when he mentioned that to Kirk Herbstreit. And it seems weird to me that it would happen with Kevin Wilson leaving. I would think that he would trust somebody, a veteran coach like Kevin Wilson, to do it. And he did it with Wilson on staff. Maybe it's a case where Fry and Hartline are very similar in age. And Hartline to me is a very intelligent guy, a very hardworking guy. I mean, he, there's a lot of great things you can say about him. I don't think he's a guy. I think he's a smart enough guy to know what he can and can't do. And I would be like very surprised if it was turned over to Brian Hartline, kind of sight unseen. I would think that he would certainly relish being maybe named as a co-coordinator along with Fry being the guy who initiates the calls, and with some input from Hartline and Day and Tony Alford and whoever. But and now Keenan Bailey is going to be the tight ends coach. So if you put a gun to my head and said, how do you think this is going to go? I would think that Fry and Hartline will be co-coordinators. Fry will initiate the calls, and there'll be input from everybody. And Day, in a certain situation, will strictly say, look, this is what I want to do here. This is what they can't defend, and this is what we have to do. And, they'll go from there. Or it's 4 minutes to go in the game. I want Mayan Williams left, Mayan Williams right, run the clock, let's get out of here. Could be like that. So that would be what I would see. I mean, by elevating Keenan Bailey, they do not have a spot on the current coaching staff unless they're enlarging the coaching staff beyond 10 full-time guys for next year. As of right now, there's no space, there's no spot open to bring a guru, as our friend Tim May would say, onto the staff, a wizard to be the play calling genius. So seems to me he's looking in staff, and for him to have said that before the game to Kirk Herbstreit in one of their sit downs, just tells me that he's already got the idea of what he wants to do in place. So I don't know. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Well, we can look at the defensive performance against Georgia and then see within a day or two that Ohio State picks up a top-notch defensive back from Syracuse, Jihad Carter. Looking back at what he accomplished here this past season with Syracuse, 3 interceptions, 3 passes defense. Those 3 interceptions came in meaningful games against Clemson, Notre Dame, and Pitt. So a nice addition for the Buckeyes. I got to say that, will I watch Syracuse once or twice a year? Yeah, I saw him play Purdue, saw him play Clemson, a couple tight games that went to the end. They also played Virginia on a Friday night. I got to admit, didn't have a whole lot in my recollection of Jihad Carter, but as I looked through things, pretty valued player coming out of Syracuse. What have you guys seen or picked up?
I haven't really had a chance to watch a lot of tape on him. I almost said film. We're so far removed from the film days. I haven't had a chance to watch a lot of tape, but I certainly have looked at his stats. I've looked at 6'2", 200 pounds. I mean, I think he's going to be somebody who's going to fit in well in terms of his athletic ability. And now it's going to be a matter of learning the Noles defense and kind of getting thrust out there. He's somebody who could have the 2 years of eligibility. Granted, if he's as good as everybody's hoping, this could be just a 1-year rental and then off to the next level for him. But he has been successful at the level he's played at, which has been Power 5. I mean, certainly playing in the ACC, maybe not necessarily for the top end of the ACC, but I guess, again, once you kind of get past what Clemson had been, what really is the top end of the ACC? I mean, Syracuse does mess around at times and has some good run, but I think he's somebody who's going to be able to step in this 3 safety type of defense and be able to claim a spot. I mean, nothing has been promised, but it's certainly a need. But now you have to still go after at least one offensive tackle. I still think you need to look at a corner. I think you still need to look at potentially bringing in, if you can get an impact tight end. But I think Jahad Carter is a good first step, and I think that it'll calm the nerves of some people who've been like, I can't believe that Michigan has already gone and gotten these 10 transfers or whatever, and Ohio State's gone out and gotten a long snapper.
I like this pickup. They need to upgrade at probably 4 or 5 positions across the defense, and I think safety was one of them. They're losing Ronnie Hickman, who has declared he's going to the NFL. Good luck with all of that. And Tanner McAllister, who was a 5th-year player, he's gone. Lathan Ransom, it seems he's on the fence, whether or not he would be back or not. I think given what you saw in the fourth quarter against Georgia, there's a lot of people that would say, they can do better than Lathan Ransom. So you bring in Jahad Carter. You figure he's going to start at one of the 3 spots. Ransom's up in the air, whether or not he'll be back at his spot or not. And then you have Kai Stokes, Sonny Styles, who was a national top 20 player. And we don't honestly know if safety is going to be his final destination at Ohio State, although you expect it for now. Court Williams, who missed all the season basically due to injury. That guy just can never seem to get healthy, it seems. And Cam Martinez, who got in there at times, got burned for a big play against Michigan. You got some guys to choose from there. I think maybe they already know that Ransom's not coming back, and that's why they went after Carter. I'm not sure. I agree wholeheartedly with what Kevin is saying, and I would look for an upgrade at corner somehow, some way, which may explain, J.K. Johnson enters the transfer portal. He started 5 games for Ohio State this past year, which is kind of interesting because they're losing Cameron Brown at one cornerback position, have Denzel Burke back. Jordan Hancock got back into the rotation at the end of the year. Maybe Johnson just kind of saw the handwriting on the wall. Even Jair Brown was playing early in the game this past week at corner. I don't know if it was ahead of Johnson or what, but so maybe he saw the handwriting on the wall that he's number 4, and if they bring in a transfer, he'd be number 5. So I don't know what to make of that, but so I agree with Kevin. I would definitely more transfer portal, offensive tackle for certain, defensive line. I would say defensive end. If you can find a pass rusher, that would help. Linebacker, they're probably okay, and corner. So those 3 or 4 positions still need some upgrades, I think, in the portal. And, this defense has got to get older, better, faster, stronger, or they're not going to be any better next year.
Our buddy David Greenshield is saying that we need tackles and defensive backs in the portal. How active is Ohio State, or will they be?
They're active. Mark Pantoni's group has to sit there and keep an eye on the portal every day. And I think that there is a concern from people that you see a lot of programs filling up quickly with their portal needs, like within a couple weeks of the portal being open. And for the sake of full honesty, Michigan did a fantastic job in the portal. It's great to play the partisan game and be like, oh, they suck, they didn't do anything. Well, that would be dishonest. They did a really good job in the portal, but they seem to clean up with the first wave of portal entries. But we know that there's going to be the first group of kids that go into the portal, and there's going to be the second group of kids that go in the portal. And Ohio State, for whatever reason, we hear names. We heard Fintrell Cypress. We hear some of these names out there, and it's a case of everybody's like, well, Ohio State has to be in on this kid. Well, if Ohio State isn't sold on that kid, then they can lightly pursue somebody, and if it doesn't necessarily work out, that's not, there's no crying over spilt milk on that. There are a lot of new names going into the portal right now. Ohio State's certainly in on some offensive tackles, a kid out of Tulsa, a kid out of Wazoo. I'm not exactly sure what the corner situation is, who the real targets are at this point, but you just have to keep swinging. And Ohio State never was not in the lead position for Jahad Carter. That was a kid they identified that they wanted, and they landed him. And that's not to say that that's always going to be the case, that Ohio State's going to say, this is the kid we want, and poof, magically he's a Buckeye. But I think you're going to see Ohio State be a little bit more aggressive at this point, as they know what the portal board looks like, and you go. Because at the end of the day, you have to stay at 85. And whether or not that is through high school kids that you sign letters of intent to, or kids through the portal, you just can't haphazardly just say, sign them all, let God sort them out. That's not how it works. You have to you have to have the math, the numbers have to equate really at all times. So the concern is valid, but until proven otherwise, I'm gonna have faith in what Pantoni's doing there.
I've got my class by class list here of the returning players. I just added Jahad Carter there with 2 years eligible remaining. Kevin, you and I both know there's a lot of dead wood on this list. There's some offensive linemen who've never seen the light of day.
About.
Yeah, I'm not mentioning specific names. I'm just saying there's some guys on that 3 years of eligibility left list that haven't seen the light of day in the first 2 or 3 years on campus. So makes you wonder if some of these guys could be processed, as the kids like to say. So, we used to lampoon Alabama about it, but, it's roster management now. And, these kids should want to go somewhere and play. I mean, if you really have that competitive desire, go to Indiana, or go to Ball State, or, go to Ohio U or Cincinnati, or go somewhere where you could play. Because, some of these guys who are in their third year at Ohio State and didn't play it down this year are never going to play at Ohio State. So I think they need to reconcile in their mind, what am I doing here? And maybe it could be a case where they get their degree and then move on, because they want to have that degree that says the Ohio State University. But I would think between now and June, they'll probably have at least 5 more guys off this roster who won't be there at the very least.
The other big name, and I use that term big name in quotes, that has entered the transfer portal will, of course, be Javonte Jean-Baptiste. He is the most, the player who received the most playing time during his career at Ohio State. Of course, J.K. Johnson was a top 50 commit at the time that he signed with Ohio State, and top 3 cornerback in the country. And Jean-Baptiste, obviously, he also was highly decorated coming out of high school, and contributed, played meaningful snaps.
Yeah, I think
we're not even talking about really Taraja Mitchell, who announced he was going in a while ago. Just finally came out of the portal, as everybody had expected. I'd seen the crystal balls, et cetera, that he was going to Florida, and he's going to Florida. So, I mean, you are seeing guys that were either that had production, or were big, had big upside in terms of guys going to the portal, and it's just kind of one of those situations. You have to be happy for Javonte Jean-Baptiste that he played one of his better games as a Buckeye in the Peach Bowl. He had half a sack, and was very had a couple plays where he disrupted the offense for UGA, and you wish him the best. I think he's visiting Ole Miss coming up here soon. Or I saw something from some Ole Miss guy about that he was going to go there. I think there's a lot of belief that as a Jersey guy he could end up at Rutgers. It's always interesting when Ohio State guys transfer out, when scholarship guys transfer out, they always land at really good places. This isn't a case of where it's somebody transferring out and then having to fall to like a low-level FCS team. All these guys go from Power 5 to Power 5.
Yeah, he was on a list, as Ohio State produced for the Michigan game, a list of guys who were honored, recognized at the senior day, but still had some eligibility left, like Josh Proctor. You may hear that he's entered the portable at some point and going to play one more year somewhere else. Xavier Johnson was on that list, and I talked to Xavier before the game, and he seemed like he might come back. So, we'll see about him. Tyler Friday is a guy that could maybe portal somewhere and go play somewhere else. So, Javonte Jean-Baptiste was in that group of guys who were recognized. The moving sidewalk is ending. Please look down. Your time at Ohio State is over, whether they decided it, or Ohio State decided it for him, but still had a year of eligibility left. And quite honestly, if they want to play National Football League football, need to go somewhere and start next year. He wasn't going to supplant Tuimoloau or Sawyer as a starter next year. So, got good luck to him, and he'll have a good fifth year somewhere else.
We can always count on Yakov 22 putting a positive spin on things. Worst bowl coach, Jim Harbaugh or Bo Schembechler? Of course, Harbaugh has lost 6 consecutive since his big splash against Florida in his initial season in Michigan. And Bo Schembechler is the worst winning percentage in Rose Bowl history, 2-8, I believe. Schembechler was consistently a favorite most of the time in those Rose Bowls, so I would consider that to be one knock against him in this some woeful comparison.
Yeah, but I think even if you're an Ohio State fan and you look at Bo Schembechler, there's no 10-year war without Bo to Ohio State's Woody Hayes or whatever. I think that you need the Bo Schembechler part of there, and people are just probably going to be like, have this, I don't want to say romantic because that's just probably the wrong word, but this favorable memory of Bo. As for Jim Harbaugh, who is the current coach and everything else, and kind of a little bit of a thorn in the side of the Buckeyes right now, and losing on a spectacular scale as of late in terms of bowl games, I think fans are going to say Jim Harbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I didn't really have much to add there. Worst bowl coach.
I was a bit surprised, Steve. That's why we had the
I'm not going to dump
pause
on Jim Harbaugh. You got to give the devil his due. He, from where he was 2 years ago at this time to now, it's a quantum leap. So, I think it just took him engaging. And instead of hiring people who were sycophants around him, the old boy Michigan Man network that they, went through his first 5 years there, he got some really good young football coaches who, I think he was surprised himself how good they became, I think, by the end of last year. So, I give credit to him. He shook things up, and whether he intended to or not, he stumbled upon a winning formula and finally have a good quarterback, after all these years through the wilderness with no discernible quarterback at Michigan. Still got some things they need to clean up defensively, obviously, but the two programs are kind of in the same situation, other than they've got McCarthy coming back and Ohio State doesn't, but a lot of the same issues in both spots, really.
Yakov, we know that you're always of best intentions, so those are never questioned. Just having a good time. David Greenshield, Kevin and Steve, what do we expect the running back room to look like next year? Do you think Dallin Hayden stays, and what about Mayan Williams to the NFL?
Well, I talked to Hayden before the game, and I got to tell you, I was very impressed talking to him. He is a bright young guy. He is as serious about football and his football career as anybody that you'll come across. A lot of guys are very lighthearted. Like you walk over and talk to Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle in his second year, and you say to him, well, Tyleik, do you view yourself maybe as a leader going forward? And he just laughs and says, I could be a leader, that type of thing. Whereas Dallin Hayden is looking straight ahead, and he has given you matter-of-fact answers to the questions. It was just two entirely different people that I spoke to in a 5-minute period. And I think that he wants to play. I think that this year he accepted his role, but I don't think anybody can deny that by the end of the year, he's a very good running back. And, dare I say, on the same level of Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. They're all three different players, obviously. So it's kind of hard to make an apples to apples to apples comparison when you're comparing apples to oranges to pears. So all three have their place. And this year proved that you need a village at running back because they're going to get beat up. So if I'm Ohio State and I'm Ryan Day and I'm Tony Alford, I'm praying to the lucky stars that Dallin Hayden sticks around, because he could be the future at that position. By his third year, he could be an all Big Ten player, if he's not splitting the carries so much with the other guys, and if he stays healthy. So I like Dallin Hayden. He got in there against Georgia. He didn't get a ton of yards, but he ran hard. He protected the football, and he got everything he could get. So I was happy with what I saw out of Dallin Hayden. Regarding Mayan Williams, nothing would surprise me. He's been beaten from pillar to post, and there are only so many miles on a running back, and he's given Ohio State 3 years. So, does he roll the dice and hope he's a late round pick somewhere and get into an NFL team and, play 4 years in the NFL and that's his football career? Given how beat up he is, those thoughts could come across his mind. Now, the flip side of that is he could also say, I want to come back to Ohio State and, do something special next year, which is entirely possible too, because they're going to have a really good team next year, in my opinion. It's just, again, how much improvement can you make on defense? How good is the new quarterback? How does the new offensive line come along? Those three are probably the biggest questions. So to me, I would put mine at 50-50, probably 60-40, leaning to come back. And I would expect Hayden to come back and give it a run. I mean, if Henderson's not 100% and Williams isn't 100%, Hayden's going to get all the work in the spring. And Evan Pryor may not be 100% as well. So I'll throw it out to Kevin. But, that's my thought on those two.
Yeah, I think that the Hayden stuff kind of, all sprouted from the talk that, that there was, Tennessee talk and everything else. Everybody but the right parties, in my opinion, were the ones talking about a potential Hayden departure. So until I hear it from the correct parties, I'm not really buying into that one. As for Mayan Williams, I don't know if anybody has a great read on that one at this point. And if they do, great. I don't have a great read. I agree with all the points Steve made. There's only so much tread on the tires. And, when you've been dealing with a lot of injuries, it's going to get kind of picked apart by the league, and whether or not you go this year or next year, is he going to significantly change who he is, what his standing is? I don't necessarily know that that's going to be the case. So I can make an argument either way, but the running back room is going to still have some depth in it. Whether or not it's Henderson, Williams, you're going to get Pryor back. You've got Dallin Hayden, and then of course you got Chip Trainum, who was given, Ryan Day has said, well, we're going to have conversations with him to see which position he would rather play, running back or linebacker. And then we had the chance to talk to Chip, and he's like, well, definitely running back. So if all of those things are true, then it sounds like Chip Trainum's going to be in the running back room. I know people are concerned over the fact that Ohio State did not sign a running back to a national letter of intent. They did get an in-state kid who came in on a preferred walk-on, a kid who had a dozen offers. So kind of a TC Caffey situation, maybe even a little better there. Maybe they don't necessarily have that gigantic name to start the season if there's a slow recovery for Trevion and everything that he's dealt with, but I think they'll be fine.
We talk Buckeyes with all of you each and every Wednesday, typically at 11 a.m. Eastern time, but because of the schedules that have to be coordinated, we sometimes have to move that time. So therefore, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live, and track Steve and Kevin on their platforms as well. Kevin, what do you got going this week?
I have no earthly idea. I'm still trying to get back. I'm still trying to get my legs back under me after a long week in Atlanta. I mean, not saying it was a bad week. It just is a long week and takes a little bit of time to get back. I just recently wrote my review of, my thoughts on the game that had happened. I'm working on some pieces of potential kids that could be entering the portal. It's just so we're ready in case things happen along those lines. But I expect to kind of wrap up the Peach Bowl more or less throughout this week, and then next week it's time to kind of move on to the next chapter.
Steve.
Yes. pivoting to basketball stuff, Ohio State's playing #1 Purdue on Thursday night, Fox Sports 1. And I headed to basketball interviews right now. Still have a raft of football interviews from the Peach Bowl that I want to put out there, some timeless stuff before the game, and a few more nuggets from after the game as well that were kind of notable. So we'll do that, and we'll be tracking the portal additions, the portal subtractions, any recruiting developments. Bill Kurlick right now is at the All-American Bowl, I think down in San Antonio, where there are 6 or 7 Ohio State players. That game's on NBC, I think, this Saturday or Sunday, so keep an eye out for that. I think there's a couple, 2, 3 guys in the Under Armour game as well down in Florida, so I'm sure we'll have details on all that. But those
they just played that game.
Oh, they just played it?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday on Tuesday?
Yeah, I guess that's what I read. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I didn't know about it. So, yeah, whatever. So, any rate, yeah, we got all that going on, and that's pretty much the extent of it. I put in our little comments here. If you put a gun to me and said, Georgia -13 in the national championship game, who are you taking? I'm taking TCU plus 13 points all day long at that. And I don't know why that line is like that, other than obviously you're trying to get even money on both sides. But I don't know. I don't know why anybody thinks Georgia's 2 touchdowns better than TCU. TCU's pretty good. So I don't know.
Yeah, I need to sit there and look at some of now that sports wagering is legal in Ohio, and I have all sorts of promo bets that I have to use in the next 13 seconds before they expire. I may have to take a closer look at that game, but 13 is an awful big number. I'm kind of liking I'm liking Georgia to win, but TCU to keep it close.
TCU's been disregarded the entire season. I guess they might as well just complete the narrative all the way through. I did not pull the trigger on what my gut was telling me about the TCU Michigan game, because I really like TCU's receivers in space against Michigan's secondary, and vice versa, their ability defensively in the secondary to handle Michigan's receivers, plus the Max Duggan factor as a dynamic playmaker with his feet in addition to the arm. But yeah, I went conventional and picked Michigan to win a close game and got burned on that one. But yeah, Georgia, TCU, 13-point spread there, but TCU continues to get disrespected. They continue to pull off the upsets. So I would think that Ohio State would have been a 8 to 10-point favorite based on that 13 line. And also it'll be interesting to see, knowing that Columbus, Ohio, regardless of the matchup, typically shows up in front of the TV sets in other various Ohio markets, whether there's going to be increased interest or people are going to be turned off and say, you know what, I don't want to see this. All right. Buckeyes Live each and every Wednesday, folks. Make it on back next week. Bring a friend or two with you. Let's double and triple the audience. And yeah, get on back here next week. For Steve, for Kevin, check out their work and their platforms as well. And we will see you next time.
Take care.